Hey everybody, I'm CJ, and in case it doesn't go without saying, because who knows, maybe it doesn't, SJWs use words to describe emotions that they don't actually feel. Now, what you need to understand, what a lot of people don't understand, in fact, is SJWs really don't human very well. All right, they have an idea of what it is to be human, but they don't completely relate to it. And whenever you see their paroxysms and whatnot on Twitter, on YouTube, and elsewhere, what you need to understand is that they don't really understand emotions. They don't really experience emotions. They've got an idea of emotions. There's an impression of them, but they don't really understand like a truly emotional reaction to something. Excuse me. They don't really understand like a genuine emotional reaction to something. And so as a result, the emotions that they experience, or at least the ones that they manifest, it's always the most extreme version of something. Does that make sense? They when when an SJW is happy, they're not just happy. They're bouncing off the ceiling with joy and exuberance, whatever joy there is in the world of an SJW. I imagine there isn't much, but that is how they that is how they express joy or anger. Anger can never be mild irritation. You know, somebody cuts you off in traffic, and so you're mad about it for like 5 seconds. You're mad. You're mad about it for 5 seconds, but this isn't going to ruin your day. It's something that was annoying. It pissed you off for 5 or 10 seconds, and then you're done. That's the end of it. Um, SJWs, they can't do that. If they're mad about something, anything at all, they're having these gigantic meltdowns, and they whatever it is that's upset them. This isn't a minor annoyance. This is a tragedy. This is a crime against humanity. This is the worst thing that has ever happened to anybody in the history of anything ever, and so on. And that's how SJWs express emotions. But they, like I say, they don't really understand them. I mean, far and away from the fact that they don't really understand facts or reason or logic. They don't understand that, but they're not rational creatures. They are emotionally constipated, and so much so that they can only experience emotions in, or at least they can only express emotions in the most extreme way possible. But their way of describing them, they've got a very small vocabulary for that. One of which, or one example of which, is the word empathy. SJWs don't really understand empathy, no more than they understand anger or happiness. They don't understand anger as an emotional state. They don't understand empathy as a sort of an action that is based upon compassion for someone else. They don't really understand that. Like I say, they have an idea of it, there's an abstraction of it, but there's not a real understanding of it. And so when they throw these words around, they don't really understand what they're saying. The people to whom they say these words, usually other SJWs, don't understand these words either. They understand them as almost like a code word. This word, empathy in this case, it doesn't describe a state of mind so much as it describes something like an ideal. So when this nitwit says that Donald Trump is incapable of empathy, you need to understand that in her world, this is the worst, the second worst possible thing that you can say about somebody. Obviously, the worst thing is to call them a Nazi, but the second worst thing, a very close number two, is saying that so and so does not have empathy. So and so is incapable of showing empathy or experiencing it. That is the worst thing in the world to them because they know the word empathy and they're kind of hoping that covers it. They're hoping you don't ask too many questions about what empathy is, what it isn't, how is it defined. They don't want you to ask that question. They want to be able to throw that verbal grenade out there and hope that they don't have to, basically hope that this doesn't show up on the test. So, in relation to this, this nitwit writes, when presented with an opportunity to express empathy for someone or to react callously, Donald Trump has proven that he will always choose the latter option. At last night's presidential debate, he was presented with so many of these opportunities, and every single time he had the chance to even pretend to be a caring, feeling human being, he rejected it. Now, guys, here's the thing. I want to draw your attention to this. Feeling. It's not that SJWs don't really experience emotions. They do. But they are so mentally screwed up, they are so emotionally constipated that showing a measured, that whenever they see somebody else, a non SJW, in other words, somebody normal, when they see a non SJW reacting emotionally to something, but in a very calm and measured way, that kind of shorts out their brains because that is not the way that they think emotions are supposed to work. Now, not to get partisan here, but I've seen both Joe Biden and Donald Trump express a certain amount of concern and a certain amount of concern over the people who are suffering with the coup. And they are also, look, it's incapable. No one is capable of pretending to be an asshole full time, nonstop. There will inevitably be a time when you let your guard down. And when they let their guards down, Trump and Biden both, you can see that there's real concern over the plight of other people. There's genuine remorse for the people who have died as a result of the coup. And they are not expressing this in a sort of cartoony, over the top sort of emotional breakdown where there are tears and sobs and they're just weeping all over the place. Obviously, that's not happening. Instead, the emotional response that both of the candidates have demonstrated in public has been, like I say, something a bit more dialed back. And it's the dialing back that SJWs will always, always, always struggle with because if you're not having this big theatrical, performative, emotional breakdown in front of the cameras, they don't really think that you're being genuine. And guys, just to kind of let the SJWs off the hook here, I think they're acting in relatively good faith considering all of their mental problems. So just bear all of that in mind. So the article, the writer goes on to say, more than 40,000 Americans are in the hospital tonight with COVID. And then this is basically the setup for not a gotcha question, but not necessarily a question of good faith. The nitwit writer says Trump could have responded with even a shred of empathy for those people who died or who are currently suffering, or for their families. Instead, he was defensive of himself, and well, he should be. This is a reflection on him and his administration. So he says, basically, as you know, 2.2 million people modeled out were expected to die. We closed up the greatest economy in the world in order to fight this horrible disease that came from China. All of these things are factually, demonstrably true. Biden says 220,000 Americans dead. If you hear nothing else I say tonight, hear this. And really, that's the number that matters. 220,000. That's the number of people who have died. Now, it does no good at all to tell people like the writer, the nitwit writer of this article, that 2.2 million people, that really was the number. Case in point. A report that helped convince Trump to take coronavirus seriously projected that 2.2 million people could die in the U.S. if we don't act. Guys, March 17th, 2020. What are the actual numbers of dead? Well, according to this, 220,000. So for ease of math, or 226,000. So, but for ease of math, we'll say 220,000. So that means that by any sane metric, it's not that 220,000 people have died if under Trump's watch. It's that Trump has saved 2 million people. 2 million people. Now, you're not going to see a reference to that anywhere in this article. The fact that Trump basically whittled those numbers down about as low as they could get. And this is as low as they could get. This is Dr. Birx. My ad blocker is not cooperating with me. Let's see if I can, yeah, here we go. All right, so Dr. Birx predicts that up to 200,000 U.S. coronavirus deaths if we do everything perfectly. Guys, this was on March the 30th of 2020. All right, so we've had the actual number, like I say, is 220,000 deaths. The worst case scenario was 2.2 million deaths, and 200,000 was the minimum that we could expect. And that's if everything goes swimmingly. So Donald Trump cared enough to save 2 friggin' million lives. But he's not reacting to this question in a way where he melts down, he tears his hair out, he lights his clothes on fire, he's in tears, sobbing and carrying on. And so for that reason, the only conclusion that this nitwit writer can reach is that Donald Trump lacks empathy. But that can't possibly be true. I mean, his own actions have resulted in him getting the coof. And yet, there's really no real regard for that among the SJWs. President Trump has basically delivered 2 million people from the hands of death, but he did so in a way where he was calm, he kept his wits about him, he gave measured responses for the most part. And so for that reason, he's now being branded as lacking in empathy. He really doesn't. What he's lacking in is the emotional constipation that would drive him to basically make a fool of himself on international TV. And obviously he's not prepared to do that. He's a calm, look, love the guy or hate him. He is a grown man, calm, relatively mature, and relatively in charge of his emotions. He's, at least as compared to an SJW, I mean, there's no question of who the more emotionally mature person is. And none of that really matters, though. He's not acting like a nitwit, and so for that reason, he lacks empathy. And this is being determined by somebody who doesn't really understand emotions. So, anyway, just something I wanted to throw out there. I'm CJ, and that's that. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share. Doing those things really helps me out. Also, I'm on Twitter at Cole Loves Comics.